Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Closers Podcast. I'm your host, Marco Alvarado. Joining me, as always, is Quinn the Moondog Kalani. Woo! What is up, my man?
Not much. What's up, dude?
Man, there's a lot that's been going on, but you're in Hawaii, and we haven't been able to talk much recently, at least on this show, because of just like technical issues, and then, subject matter gets in the way, and finally, after 2 weeks, we're going to both be in on an interview of sorts. I'm pretty excited. We're going to be talking about cults, specifically for this episode, Jonestown, or better known, well, not better known, people just call them Jonestown, but they should be known as the People's Temple. That is what the cult was called. And joining us to talk about this specific cult for this week is one of my good friends, Gabriela. Hi.
What's up? I'm good. I liked the howl.
Thank
when
you.
you introduced Quinn. For next time, I would like an animal noise as well.
Oh, what would your animal? What would you like your animal to be?
That's you can go ahead and decide that.
Quinn branded himself as the Moondog. He's the one who created. He kind of like set himself up for that.
It was sort of a running joke, but then it turned into a life of its own. Now we did create some other animal-esque nicknames. There's spring chickens, and there's also sun cats, and there's October cows.
I don't know if you'd want to be a cow, Gabby.
I don't think so. It's like choosing your own nickname. It just doesn't work.
Let's see. Well, we'll figure it out, because you're going to be actually on 2 more episodes to talk about 2 other cults. So we have some time to come up with some sort of nickname for you. But I just want to talk about you for a little bit real quick, Gabby, before we jump into Jonestown. So you currently reside in Seattle, correct?
I do. Your favorite Seattle transplant.
It's true. The only one I know, actually. So by default, you are my favorite.
Yes.
There's been some political activity happening in Seattle, just like the rest of the country. And most famously, there was a cop-free zone that was established there a couple months ago. What was it called, Gabby?
Yeah, so it started off as CHAZ, which stood for Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, and they swapped it over to CHOP, which stands for Capitol Hill Occupied Protest. So Capitol Hill is a district in Seattle, and there is a precinct there, and the cops voluntarily left, and protesters came and took over. I want to say it was about 6 to 7 blocks, and this was during our shelter in place, so a lot of businesses were closed, and businesses weren't that affected outside of the looting in protest, but and now the police are back. CHOP got disassembled because it turned violent. There was a couple shootings, people had died, and
Okay, so do you live pretty close to where this was established?
Yeah, I currently live maybe 6 blocks away, so my area, it can get rambunctious, but I'm not on top of it.
Oh, okay. And how long did it last there entirely?
Ooh, I want to say it was a couple weeks, but I could be completely wrong.
Okay.
The start of it started off incredibly strong, and it kind of trickled down.
Yeah. Do you find it to be pretty disappointing that it ended the way it did?
Oh, this could be controversial.
It's fine. Trust me, it's
okay. It's no, because it got violent.
Okay.
If it hadn't gone violent, I think it would have been different. But since there were shootings from civilians, from people trying to protect the area, of course it has to get shut down. You can't have that.
Yeah, people dying and stuff. Did people die actually, or were they just injured in the shootings? Do you know by any chance?
It definitely injured. I want to say at least 1 or 2 people had died. And people had died in protest too here. Like there was one on a protest on the freeway, and a car came and killed a couple people.
Oh shit.
Very unfortunate, but I think we're also seeing this everywhere else too.
Yeah.
It's just not, it's more talked about locally rather than on a big scale.
That makes sense. I just know that people have been talking about the protests. I mean, there's different factions that have been talking about the protests in different, different tones, and the perception I know outside of Seattle, at least from California's perspective, looking at Seattle, it's definitely like there's a lot of people pointing and being like, oh, they, like Portland and Seattle, they deserve to have like federal agents going into those cities because the city government can't, handle it on their own, obviously.
No.
You live there. You live in one of those cities. Does it look like they don't have it under control at all?
Yeah, so there's a lot of local politics that's have gone into this, but federal agents were not needed in the slightest bit. It, like I mentioned, the violence, it wasn't incredibly violent to where something like federal agents were needed.
Right.
Of course, there's pushback between protesters and police, as there should be, and people are uncomfortable, which it's great. It opens people's minds a bit more.
Yeah.
But no, it wasn't like anything where the government or our local politicians couldn't handle. And in the beginning, there was support with the local politicians. And then, like I said, that also trickled off and people say one thing, do the other.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's good. I wanted to have somebody from that neck of the woods, as some say, to say that everything is okay. We don't need to send any federal, goons out there or anything like that. Because I feel like I haven't heard too many people from that area necessarily being able to have a platform, even though this isn't the most high platform. It still is something. So I just wanted to get
I would definitely recommend following like Seattle locals. I can send you some Instagram people to follow because there are leaders in Seattle that have been putting these protests together. Anyone from the Black Lives Matter Seattle chapter is a great resource.
Right.
So it's all local. That's why we don't hear much about it, because I don't really know what's going on in Sacramento or the Bay or even LA.
Yeah.
It's very local.
Yeah, every city has its own little like protest ecosystem, it seems.
Yeah.
It's hard to tap into those until there's like a viral video that comes out of one city that everybody's like, oh my God, this is crazy. And then
which is Seattle or Portland.
Yeah. Recently. Yeah, it's exactly that. Would you guys say that right now our political landscape has been divided into very, very, very polarized groups? Would you say that? You have one side that's very, very right-leaning, and you have a left that is very, very left-leaning. Of course, there's people in the middle, but it's getting more and more polarized every month, it seems. It's getting the gap is widening. Would you say that? Would you agree with that, guys?
I think that being in a city, and both you and I, Quinn, I'm assuming you're from Hawaii, right?
No.
Are you from California?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, man. I know he's in Hawaii right now.
No, I know it is. Just his responses made me laugh.
I think for all of us, we're all from California, and now we're kind of in various areas that we do have such a liberal leaning state. And then even though, Marco, I know you're from Sacramento and you probably get a different opinion on this because Sacramento is so close to the state of Jefferson, you have a lot of ideas.
Jesus. Yeah.
Honestly though, and I think everywhere you go, the more east you go, the more right political leaning it is. And I've definitely seen it very polarized, especially on Instagram. And it's very much been you stand with me or you stand against me. And we definitely saw that with Trump being elected.
Yeah.
You're either with me or you're against me. And in certain cases, I get it. But also in a lot of cases, it shouldn't be true.
Right.
And people are making these very bold and general statements, which catches people's attention and which is what they're supposed to do. But once you do a little bit more research and digging and staying educated with the situation, then you might not get as polarized opinions. So I think from what we see on the media and headlines and Instagram, that's where we're getting our polarized opinions from.
So it stems from the media. It stems from the information that you take in. Now, there are groups of people here that love to demonize the other side. One of the I agree with everything you're saying, by the way, Gabby, before we jump to something else, but one of the classic ways to demonize another side is by saying like, "Oh, all those snowflakes, they have a cult-like mentality. All those rednecks, they have a cult-like mentality following Trump, generalizations. Cult-like." Well, let me tell you, I had to research Jonestown for this episode, and it's insane to me how, because of an ecosystem, a cult-like mentality, right? We use that phrase like, oh, a cult-like mentality. We don't really know what it means. That cult-like mentality can lead to 914 people drinking Flavor Aid. Okay, it's not Kool-Aid. Flavor Aid, and dying in a jungle in Guyana. Okay? All I'm saying, man, is that when we use that phrase, cult-like mentality, when you toss it around pretty generally, it has some pretty heavy weight to it. Actually, the weight of 914 bodies attached to it. So it's for me now, listening to that and hearing, both sides toss that around, it's like, well, I don't think people are indoctrinated into any sort of ideology to the point that they would follow somebody into the, Guyanian jungle and like live there for like a year or years. And with that, I want to segue into Jonestown, if I may. Are you guys ready to take this journey with me?
I am ready to drink the Kool-Aid, Marco.
You're ready to drink the Kool-Aid? Are you ready to drink the Kool-Aid, Quinn?
Depends on what flavor.
It's lemon, I think. I think that's what they had. It was yellow. And it's not Kool-Aid, it's actually Flavor Aid. Sorry. We don't have that budget, okay? We can't afford the Kool-Aid.
Was this the Aldi's brand?
Yes, the Aldi's brand. Yeah, exactly. So I think it would be just to start at the inception of Jim Blockhead, Mr. Roblox himself, Jones. And I call him that because this fool's head is like a straight square, dude. You look at him, he has like the back of his head, like you're looking at him from the front, his head looks normal, but you look at him from the side, it's straight flat. You know how most people have like a curve, right? It's a normal human head. It looks flat because of his hair. So it just looks straight flat. It's like a box. That's why I call him Mr. Blockhead. Okay, so when I call him that throughout this episode, you know who I'm talking about. So I thought it'd be just to start with his upbringing because it's very telling. I think we've all known kids that have kind of acted this way when we were growing up that are just kind of off. He was born in 1931. Okay, his mom and dad were not religious at all. They never took him to church. They were pretty clearly actually like atheists. They thought it was dumb to believe in that type of stuff, and they passed that on to Jim Jones. He actually bought into that. He believed that too. He believed that there was not a God. But what he did also believe in is authority. So he idolized, people in positions of power. So like presidents, pilots, people that, you would traditionally give respect to. But specifically, there was one person that he very much idolized. His name is Adolf Hitler. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was very much into researching Adolf Hitler.
Who's that?
I know, right?
Some sort of relationship with Anne Frank, right?
So I think there's something there. I don't know. I couldn't get too much into it. I was too busy researching this. But apparently, this guy Adolf Hitler was the leader of Nazi Germany. Now, Jim Jones wasn't, he didn't believe in Nazism per se, actually at all, which we'll get to. But what he did believe in was the tactics that Adolf Hitler used to galvanize people around him and basically become a god in the eyes of his people. That's what he liked to research. So what this kid started doing, this kid would find dead little animals right around the neighborhood. And he didn't have any supervision because his mom was working and his dad was an alcoholic, so he could just do whatever he wanted. He would go around the neighborhood, find dead animals, and do burials for them. And he would make the neighborhood kids also partake in these funerals for these dead animals. It got to a point where he would start to kill dead animals, or kill dead animals. He would start to kill animals just to give them a funeral. And so kids started thinking, this guy's pretty weird. So I don't know if you guys have ever known any like weird kids when you were younger, but I mean, I didn't know any kids that would do this, but I've known some kids that drifted in that weird kind of direction. He was also the type of kid that would go to school every like day in his Sunday's best, always in a suit, always to the nines, you know. And back then, you know, that's not cheap, you know. So, and his family wasn't rich, so he wore his clothes all the time. He wore that same outfit constantly.
We appreciate a stylish man.
Exactly. Quinn, did you ever wear your Sunday's best to school?
No, growing up in the South, it wasn't, you know, they were just called school clothes. Now you would have, your clothes would be separated. You know, you would have clothes designated for school, you know, because you're going to work.
Yeah.
You know, that was, that's something that's the mentality there. You know, you have your school clothes, your school shoes, and that's what you wear to school. And then, you know, if you want to go play, well, you have a separate set of clothes for that.
Right. So, okay.
So,
well, I'm glad to know that neither of you guys were the type to wear like really nice clothes to school and everybody else is just in like khakis. So
in a tank top, sunglasses, and red beanie.
Yeah, everyone else is in their, you know, is in their beach cruiser wear, and you're the only one with like a 9-piece suit. Jesus, 3-piece suit, whatever. Okay.
A lot of buttons.
As he was growing up, he never really had friends. He was always on the outside, and he started to recognize that black people in America also were ostracized from the greater communal conversation, the greater, you know, national conversation. And he started to empathize with those people. As he was growing up, he actually was taken in by a Pentecostal family. He was kind of not adopted, but he spent a lot of time around this family, and they took him to, you know, their church. And once he was introduced to the church, and he saw how the congregation would galvanize around the preacher or the pastor or the deacon, he started hopping around from church to church, all these different denominations of Christianity, and started taking notes on how those different pastors or, you know, church leaders would conduct their services. So that brings us to the establishment of the first iteration of the People's Temple, which was actually called Community Unity. And it was a storefront. What a great name, huh? It's like, it has unity in twice, right? Community.
It's catchy.
Unity. Very catchy. This guy was not just, you know, a cult leader. Like, he knew how to brand. You know, you don't have to go to school for marketing. Why am I in school for marketing? Like, Jesus.
I ask myself that question about you when you told me what you were studying. And I'm like, why is he going to school?
I know, right? Why is he doing that? Why is he wasting his time? I ask myself that every morning while I'm eating my breakfast, my avocado bagel breakfast. So he established Community Unity in 1953 in a storefront church, and he began to amass a following by talking to people individually and solving their problems. So, for instance, there was an old lady who had no electricity at her house, an old black lady. So he literally would sat her down, and they together wrote a letter to the electrical company, and a day later, she got power. So he would do very small things like that to help people. They felt loyal to him because he went out of his way to help them individually, and he started amassing a following that way. So slowly he started building rapport with people and, you know, built an audience. In 1955, he renamed Community Unity because it got bigger. It got big enough to, you know, they could move outside of a storefront into the People's Temple. And they got a location in Indianapolis, a bigger location, where he started having nightly services. And Jim Jones did not discriminate based on race or actually based on anything. He allowed atheists to come in. Any sort of denomination of Christianity could be welcomed in to the People's Temple, and they'd be welcomed with open arms, which is pretty interesting because at the time that kind of sparked some tensions between him and the rest of the Christian community in Indianapolis, because they weren't necessarily like as segregationist as Alabama, but they were very much like separate but equal. They're like, we don't like want to antagonize the black community, but we don't want them around us at all. And once he started bringing them into the fold, in terms of like the city, then he was like, I'm not, the community as a whole was like, we don't like this Jim Jones guy. We're not really into what he's saying.
May I ask, if someone were to come from another denomination, were they expected to convert, or were they allowed to maintain their previously held faiths?
That's what I was actually getting to. That's a very awesome question. Thank you, Quinn. So if somebody converted to this People's Temple version of Christianity, which I'm going to outline exactly what they believed, they could keep everything that they believed in. All that you believe in when you join the People's Temple is that everybody should be equal, because socialism is key. Socialism is above everything. You can't have Christianity without socialism. That is what they wholeheartedly believed. So you can believe any book that you want. If you prefer the King James whatever book, I don't know. I'm not Christian, so I don't know these things. But you can have any sort of book, and you can have your own, beliefs. But as long as you want everybody to be equal, and that's the top of your belief pyramid, then everything else can fall in line for you in the People's Temple. That is what they believe wholeheartedly. So going into socialism, there was actually 3 beliefs that you had to have in order to, fall in line with the People's Temple. So I already talked about socialism. So what I wrote down is it resembled humanitarianism, or actually humanism, in its understanding of the power of human beings to recreate and reshape reality for the benefit of everybody, right? So just saying that we have the power to change our realities. That's it. That's how they viewed socialism. And then Christianity, coupled with socialism, was centered around solving the problems of the world, claimed that the real message of Christianity could be lived out through radical sharing and mutual support. And then this is the last piece, and this kind of pertains more to the later teachings of the People's Temple, but utopianism was the third facet of the People's Temple's ideology. And the overall goal of the People's Temple was to establish a utopia with racial integration and social justice through socialist and Christian means. And so like the people who joined the People's Temple genuinely were good people, especially in the beginning. Like they were generally young people of all races who, during this time, the late 50s, early 60s is when the hippie movement started popping up. And so you had a lot of kids who were traveling from the East Coast, going out west to like San Francisco area. And all along the way, they would stop at Indianapolis and they would hear about this preacher, Jim Jones. They'd go, and that he's all about integration, racial equality. They'd go see him and get in, and they would just stay in Indiana. There was a lot of cases of that.
Would you say it's more vulnerable people that are coming into it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
It's definitely an aspect of cults. But was he targeting more vulnerable people?
Yes, he was targeting specifically. He noticed, I totally forgot to leave this part out. Thank you, Gabby, for bringing that up. But he saw that the black community was obviously poorer than the white community, and it's easier to help, people that don't have much than people who have already most of the power in society. So he went after specifically the black community at first, and he actually adopted a lot of practices of black pastors and how they would talk, and actually they're like speech patterns. Like he got that deep with it, so that way he could be more relatable to that community. And a lot of people claimed that I researched that when they looked at Jim Jones, they didn't see a white guy or a black guy or anything. They didn't look at his color at all. Like he was just above all of that. which kind of I feel like it started. That's where the whole like him becoming bigger than than Christianity and socialism came from. He started separating himself, putting him above everything from the very beginning. But of course with cults, it's a very slow crawl to the eventual, point where he's like the king and they're all of his like subjects, right? So
I have a question on the peripheral, Marco.
Yeah.
Do you know? Because I don't. At which point did the Greek word utopia, meaning no place, nowhere, become synonymous with a land of idealism?
So the term was actually coined by Sir Thomas More for his 1516 book Utopia, describing a fictional island society in the South Atlantic Ocean off the coast of South America. The opposite of a utopia is a dystopia, which dominates. So I don't know where you are getting.
Well, the Greek origin of the word, if you look up the Greek origin of the word utopia, it actually translates to nowhere. I know that. I know that for a fact, but I don't know where it got lost in translation.
I have no idea. That is interesting, though, that it once meant the opposite. But
yeah,
in terms
you might want to double check that. I believe I'm right that utopia is Greek for nowhere.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
It could be because a utopia is a part of an imagined community, so it's just not possible to have. So that's where the nowhere can stem from, is that we cannot have a utopia.
Yeah. The author might have been using, like Gabby said, might have been using that word specifically as a device to kind of signify that a utopia isn't possible. It's literally nowhere.
So it's interesting that, we have so many societies within a greater society that strives for a place that is non-existent. Yeah,
exactly. And that's the core. That's what he's not talking about a utopia yet, like a lot of, churches talk about, heaven and a paradise, like go to paradise. Eventually we'll get to the part where he's like, oh, we found paradise. It's in Guyana. And
it's interesting, because the end game of the search of the utopia ultimately leads to nowhere.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I'm reading a little bit more about this. And so utopia is spelled with a U. And then in Greek, what you were saying, the translation is OU, utopias. And so that means no place or nowhere. And then there's also utopias with an EU, which is a good place. So it's almost like a play on words.
Interesting.
So it has an inverse. It has an inverse word that goes along with it.
I just sent you the article that I just read.
See, this guy Thomas More, man, he knew how to play with words. If that's one thing he knew how to make interesting new words. Let me tell you.
We love puns here. Oh yeah, I was gonna ask. You had like 3 points that they followed. What would you want to call that?
They never wrote down exactly what they believed. That was I got that off of the San Diego State University website.
San Diego State, for some reason, did a lot of research on Jim Jones. But yeah, so one of the themes was you mentioned radical sharing, and is that going back to resources?
Yes. Yeah. So with radical sharing specifically, everything, this doesn't come till like a couple years later, where he really is hardcore about the congregation giving Jim Jones everything, giving him and the church or the temple, their houses, their money, everything, their cars, even it'll get to the point where they're giving even their significant others and children to him in all the ways that you are thinking that means that is what it means. And it gets pretty bad. And sharing in individualism from the beginning is already, the devil, because he's taking socialism obviously very seriously, but he puts the community above the individual, but eventually the community is replaced with Jim Jones. And he is the community. You don't have a community without me, and that is where he gets people to do literally almost anything.
Yeah,
that
which
he
is
wants.
like a theme we're going to see here over the next couple episodes,
Mm-hmm.
because these leaders, they're providing a resource for people that they won't have without them, or manipulated into believing so.
Exactly. And it's crazy to see the descent, the spiral down this crazy rabbit hole that leads to Guyana, apparently. We
Not
know where it's
Ghana.
on the
Can we make sure we're pronouncing this right?
it's Guyana.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. It's Guyana.
I
I thought it
hate
was
to-
Guyana, but it's not. It's Guyana.
Guyana. Okay.
Yes.
The
So
last thing we need is to mispronounce.
I know, yeah. No, it's not.
Okay.
So let's see. So after the group, the People's Temple began gaining more and more traction in Indianapolis, Jim Jones began reading Esquire magazine, and I'm just kidding. He didn't. He always read Esquire magazine. He's a classy guy.
He needs to know what's going on.
Yeah, he needs to know, right? So basically what happens is Jim Jones is reading an Esquire magazine, and they have an article that say like top 10 best places to go, or top 8 best places to go in the world to escape a nuclear fallout. On that list was Ukiah, California, and Guyana. That's a literal article that you can look up. It really is a thing. And
guys, my grandma's from Ukiah. Like, she
Really?
lives in Ukiah.
Oh, dude, she might have met Jim Jones.
I'll have to ask her what's her relationship with Jim Jones.
You might have to, because so they don't go there straight away. A lot of people, get confused. Jim Jones actually went to Guyana and Brazil before they ever left to Ukiah. So it was at this point that he's like, okay, I'm getting heat in Indianapolis for, creating this congregation that's integrated. And he's a paranoid guy just naturally. And around this time, he started taking amphetamines, which is why he started having to wear sunglasses, because his eyes became red as my hat, like literally that red. But anyways, that's not until a little later when his eyes got that bad. But he started becoming really paranoid about a nuclear war and, a fallout and stuff like that. So he wanted to go to a place where, once the end of days come, the congregation will be the people that repopulate the earth, basically.
And this is still late 70s, or
no.
What time period is this?
We're in 1960.
Way before that.
We're in
Okay.
1961 right now. So in
Okay,
1961.
so we're at the start of the Cold War.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say so.
So would you say his nuclear war fears were founded or unfounded?
I mean,
considering the political climate of the Cold War?
I mean, I don't know much about the Cold War and like the climate of the time specifically, but I know a lot of people were scared around that time, and he used that fear to his advantage, but also because he was also scared too. It wasn't like he was totally cool. He was also kind of freaking out. So he took down 2 places, and he was like, you know what, let's go to Ghana. So he packed up his family and moved out to Guyana. And he tried to build a congregation out there, and he went out there in 1962. He stayed out there for 2 years, and look, people tell you if you're from outside of California, don't, like everyone has the dream to become a movie star, right? Not everybody, but there's some people around the world that want to go and become a movie star. People want to come to Hollywood. That's the place you go to become famous, right? That's what everyone thinks, and you fail because most people fail at that. Well, Guyana is like that, but for missionaries. Like, there's a ton of people that, like, from every denomination, even, like, there were some, I don't know if they use the term missionaries, but there were some people who are Muslim who also were trying to spread that religion in Brazil and Guyana at the time. So there was a lot of different faiths in that area. And also, he didn't speak Portuguese. So he wasn't successful at all in cultivating another congregation, because he was hoping, because there was so much poverty in that area at the time, he was going to use that to his advantage, and he was going to be able to, make an even bigger congregation there, but it just didn't work out.
Just to clarify, Guyana is on the east coast of South America, like north of Brazil?
Yeah, it's Guyana.
Okay.
Yeah.
Guyana, okay.
Yeah, Guyana. And
that's why they speak Portuguese, guys.
Yeah, it's northeast corner of it, right next to Venezuela, and
Gotcha.
that's going to be really interesting later on. But it was a total failure. He wasn't able to build a congregation there at all. But he was also a huge narcissist. Go figure. No way. Who would have believed? Who would have thought?
What
right?
a surprise!
I know. Yeah, a cult leader or a narcissist? No way. But he never wanted to admit when he was wrong or when he lost. He never wanted to fail. That was like his biggest fear, is failing. So he stayed in Guyana even a year after he realized it was just not going to happen. Eventually, his family moved to Sao Paulo, and then JFK got assassinated. And once JFK got assassinated, he used that as an excuse to go back to the States. He was like, okay, people need me because, like, this crazy time's happening in America. I need to be with my people. So he went back.
So the People's Temple just ran on while he was gone for the 2 years. Everything was fine. Nothing shocking happened. They were just happy and
That's what he thought.
Oh.
That's what he thought. But then
he returns.
He returns and he realized that the temple is split up into like different subgroups because he left. He didn't just leave like one person in charge of it. I couldn't find any information on who he left the People's Temple in charge with, but it was a group of people, and each person almost like took up a different part of Jim Jones. Like there was somebody who was super into Christianity, another person just totally into socialism, another person who was just into the racial integration part of it, and the people that like believed in socialism more that were in the congregation left and followed that person, and then another they totally split up. And
You're saying the absence of Jim Jones, the absence of their leader, beget tribalism within the people.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So with his congregation already split up, nobody really caring about Jim Jones coming back, and also because of the racial tensions at the time still ramping up in that area, and he packed up his remaining followers and was like, all right, I guess we're going to go to my second choice, Ukiah, California. We're going there. So he moved everybody over there into a compound in Ukiah.
Okay, so just to sum it up, you're using a lot of words here. He went to Guyana first and then came back after JFK, and then found out the People's Temple was almost falling apart without his leadership, and it created some subgroups, so he lost some followers. And then he decided to but just head west with his followers, and then also gain new ones.
Yes. So that's actually what I wrote down. So on the way to California, they bought like 5 Greyhound buses and fit everybody in there.
They bought the Greyhound buses? Like a business expense?
Yes. They bought Greyhound buses and drove all the way across country.
Who drove? You need a special license for that.
Apparently you can sway bus drivers with socialism. Who would have thought? Who would have thought you could sway bus drivers with just socialistic ideas?
Public city bus drivers, yeah. They need to easily be swayed by socialism.
Hey, I know, yeah. So on their way across country, they stopped in different towns too, and Jim Jones did guest sermons at different churches along the way, and so they were able to convert. I see that term is interesting too, because they didn't even necessarily convert them; they integrated them into their group. That's a better way to say it.
They were along the way, they were all inclusive.
Yes, and like how one person described it is like Jim Jones came into town, he had buses full of people, and it was like a party started in their town. Like people started like dancing. There's like music. Like it's a fun environment. They get caught up in the party and like, oh yeah, let's go on these buses, and like they go on the buses and the party's happening, and then all of a sudden they drive off and everyone's like, wait, what the fuck? Wait, no, what? Why are we leaving? Oh shit. Okay, I'm in it. And like that, they would literally like just do that from city to city all the way to Ukiah. And
so they kidnapped people.
No, because they wanted to go.
But then they're driving off.
Yeah.
And I guess this goes back to free will and free choice.
Exactly.
They could turn around, but they're already on a bus.
There were people who were like, "Hey, can you let me off?" And they would let those people off. But generally, like once they got on the bus, and people were like, "Hey, like I know, like it's weird. You might not have been expecting this, but like this is what we want. Like you would fit perfectly in." And then at that point, the followers would do their thing and like try to integrate that person.
So no kidnapping was involved.
Not that I could find. Maybe people were kidnapped.
So at the moment, they're a non-violent organization.
Yes, they are 100% nonviolent at this moment. Actually, for the majority of the time, they're pretty nonviolent. But that does obviously, of course, change. But so they go to Ukiah, and at this point, Jim Jones starts spreading his tentacles into San Francisco politics and California politics, and he starts using his giant base of people that he has to like sway elections and get more clout within the government.
Sounds like Amazon.
Basically, he was a young Bezos. Around this time is actually when he started wearing the sunglasses all the time. Around this time, and
it's sunny in California. Hey man,
true.
Sunny California.
He's the Jack Nicholson of cult leaders.
Yes. I want to just go back real quick and just clarify why I spent a lot of time talking about his first trip to Guyana. That's the turning point for him to really like that's when him failing to establish that in Guyana kind of made him go crazy. Like that's when he wanted to like 100% double down on everything he was doing in Indianapolis, and he wasn't going to allow anybody, and especially when he came back to Indiana and saw all that, he was like, no, I'm not going to allow anybody to take me down or take my people away from me. That's when that whole mentality started going.
I imagine, coming back to Guyana and seeing how splintered everyone was with it, in his absence.
Yes.
I imagine exactly. He shouldered the blame for that, did he not?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, he did. And of course, it wasn't just like he was able to just pick up and leave Indianapolis. He, at this point, is when he kind of started becoming kind of a dick, even more than he already just is naturally. And so when people weren't on board with moving to California, he would generally do three things. He would start with the fear. Oh, there's going to be a nuclear war, and you are going to die in a nuclear fallout if you don't come with me. And then if they're like, no, I feel safe here, then he's like, well, California has a lot of opportunity. We're going to be close to San Francisco. Like, it's a good
Ukiah's not that close to San Francisco.
Well, to people on the East Coast, it is. And they have buses too, so they would go to the city pretty often for like recruitments and stuff. But anyways, and then the third thing he would use if opportunity and fear wouldn't work is guilt. He's like, hey, remember when I helped you turn the lights on back at your place? Yeah, you owe me. You need to come with me because you owe me. And he would guilt trip people into going. So at that point, that's when the manipulation definitely sunk in a lot. And it just continued when they got to Ukiah, because at this point is when they really became they got into a compound. Before they were living all in their own little houses and stuff. But this is when the mentality of a cult really set in, because people would go work, right, wherever. They would go for their jobs. Outside of the cult. They would go work. Their paychecks would be given directly to Jim Jones, or like Jim Jones's inner circle. And then they would get an allowance out of what they made. They would get like pennies out of that. The rest would go to the church. And then on top of that, they would have to work like 80-hour weeks within the compound, doing like random shit, like of course like cleaning dishes and like straightening up, but also like they would have like a bunch of people just like digging holes for no reason off to one side. Like they would find ways to exhaust. He would find ways to exhaust his people, which I think both of you could attest. Like if you have a group of people that are exhausted, they're not going to think clearly. They're not going to really, be able to.
I was just going to say, it's almost like he is giving them tasks to make it seem like they have a purpose within the community, and also to make them delusional.
Exactly. And when everybody questioned, hey, like I worked my ass off at work and then I have to come back and dig holes for the rest of the night, like I want to go to sleep, he'd be like, that's very bourgeois of you. And then he would give them spankings. they're not playful, okay? These spankings that he would give people are with like belts, and it would be up to like 200 lashings. Like there was at least a couple accounts where people got beat that bad. So physical abuse started around this time. Of course, around that time, there's a lot of, hippies, and a lot of them came into the group as well, because in San Francisco, every weekend, they would get him and his congregation would get bussed into San Francisco, and they would like try to recruit people in to the People's Temple, kind of like how you see, what are they called? Those people with like the signs that just sit in random places. Jehovah's
There's
Witnesses.
a lot of those. Hey, we're not talking shit about Jehovah Witnesses.
No, I'm not talking shit.
No.
I'm not talking shit about anybody. I'm just saying that's a practice that Jim Jones and his people used. It's very
a lot
similar
of
to
cults did this. They went out for recruiting and either like put up signs or just hand out flyers.
Yeah.
Scientology too. They would sit and do like free diagnostics with their Diagnetics.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what they would do on the weekends. And of course, everyone is really happy. They would sing songs on the street. A lot of people who were, addicted to drugs or alcohol, a lot of, young LGBT folk who were ousted from their Midwest homes, their Midwest parents' homes would, wind up in the temple because they had nowhere else to go. And Jim Jones is like, I will welcome you in with open arms. And they were, given a place to stay. A lot of people, it was their last line before homelessness. So he very much preyed on those people. And the thing, too, it wasn't just him. Like, he had an inner circle that would do everything and anything he said. And that inner circle was definitely established in Indiana with some of his most loyal people who knew that he was all bullshit when it came to being a prophet, which I'm going to get into right now. So how did Jim Jones come off as a prophet and people swore up and down that he performed miracles right in front of their eyes? Well, because he's a con man. He's a con man. And he knew that there were people within the church who were atheists who didn't care about all this Christianity stuff, and they just wanted socialism. That's all they wanted. So he would take those people aside and be like, hey, if you help me fool these Christian people, we can further socialism because we need people. Numbers equals wins. So that's what they did. There was a video, really hilarious video, of this lady in a cast in a wheelchair, and she's in the congregation, and Jim Jones points her out, and it's like, you're in a wheelchair. And she's like, yeah, you're gonna walk today. And she's like, no, I'm not, I can't, my leg's broken. He's like, no, you're gonna walk today. Take the cast off. And like magically the cast just comes off of her, and she's like, her leg is there, and he's like doing the whole hand thing. He's like giving her power and shit.
Speaking in tongues.
Speaking in tongues. Are you going to talk about the cancer?
Yes, I'm going to talk about the cancer.
Okay.
I got that out of your essay, which I thank you for allowing me to peruse. It was very helpful. So with this lady in the wheelchair, he was like giving her power or whatever with his hand. I don't fucking know. From the pulpit. Okay, he wasn't like up close. And he was like, walk. Take a step. She's like, I can't. Take a step. She like takes a really like, unsure step. And she like almost falls down, and like people help her up. And he's like, take another step. And she like takes another step. And like over the course of like 3 minutes, she's like magically running. She's literally running around this.
Like Forrest Gump.
Yeah, like Forrest Gump, just straight booking it across. Like this old lady is just running around this church. People are going crazy, losing their minds. People are throwing their hats up in the air. Like people are going insane for this. And yeah, that was all bullshit. I don't know if you could tell. That was actually not real.
The paper mache cast gave it away. But...
Yeah, I think that's the first sign. Also, well, like what Gabby was referring to, there was a classic thing he would do is like, hey, you have cancer. Like, he would just point to a random person in the crowd. Just like, you have cancer. You don't even know. And they're like, what? Me? Yeah, you have cancer. Hey, you other person from the other side of the room, help that person from the other side of the room who has cancer, pass it. So what he'd make him do is go to the bathroom. He'd make him go to the bathroom. They'd, pass the cancer, and they'd bring
digestively.
Apparently, no one else was allowed in the bathroom except for that person who was passing it, and the helper, who was designated by Jim Jones. They would come out of the bathroom with this like bloody excrement in like a paper towel, give it to Jim Jones, and he's like, he passed the cancer, and everyone's like, yeah!
It was a chicken breast.
Yeah, it was chicken breast.
Well, in fairness, was it free range chicken? Because if it wasn't, cancer is.
Yeah, no, I don't know about the quality of life that the chicken had, but there were many chickens who were harmed in this practice, which I do not condone.
I wonder if they ate it afterwards, because it's a community, so maybe, or they were all vegetarians. Who knows?
Maybe. Oh. Either that, or they gave it to the pet chimpanzee. That was the pet chimpanzee that was actually the mascot of the People's Temple for a long time. I'm not sure exactly how long they had him, but in Ukiah, there was a pet store that Jim Jones purchased this random chimpanzee that was just for sale there. He purchased it, and his name was Mr. Muggs. It was named Mr. Muggs. His name was Mr. Muggs, and he was a chimpanzee. And he actually, it probably made him wear like a bow tie and everything too. Poor thing.
A bowler hat.
Yeah, with a cigar and poor thing, man. But yeah, no, it tragically passed away in Jonestown. It survived up until the actual massacre, and it's actually counted as
one. They took it to Guyana with it?
Yes, yeah.
Did they also buy the planes? Because I don't think you're allowed to bring a chimpanzee on a plane.
I'll get to the planes.
All right.
Because there's a lot there. So that's how he would kind of stage his miraculous actions, right? That's a way he did it. There's a lot of other things that he would do over the course of the People's Temple existence to make people think that he was actually a prophet. But those are like the most famous things that I could find. I don't want to go on for too long, so that's why I'm kind of like shortening it up. I think the rise is a lot more interesting than the fall, and that's why. And then, people already know about what kind of happened, like towards the end of the People's Temple. But I thought the rise is interesting, so that's why I spent more time on that. So one of his most famous sayings that he would constantly say, and I'm going to dig a little deep into this aspect because I find it really, really interesting. And I kind of touched on it when it came to like passing the chicken guts or the cancer. But he would often say is, if you see me as a friend, I'll be your friend. If you see me as a father, I'll be your father. If you see me as your savior, I'll be your savior. If you see me as your God, I'll even be your God. So around this time, he started to say this a lot. And what he was doing by saying this is obviously, I will be whatever you want me to be. And because he had people who just were following him for the socialistic ideology, or just following him because of the Christianity, or just the racial, the anti-racism angle, or any other reason, he knew he had like kind of like a ragtag group of people, even though it was close to 1,000 people at this point. But it wasn't just under one ideology. There was a lot of different things he was pulling from, a lot of people he was pulling from. So he was like, I will be anything you want. And like I said earlier, where he would tell like the people who didn't believe in God at all, and he'd pull them aside and be like, hey, so these people, I don't fucking like these people. Like, I like you guys. You guys are my people. And so you guys have to help me convince them that I'm God so we can like rise up. Like, he would pull the socialists aside, and then he would also pull the Christians aside and be like, see, they're non-believers. Okay. So like you have to try to convince them that I am God, because that's, so he would do a lot of interplay within the group, and he would make them fight and create some animosity within the group, just so that way he could come in and solve it and stop it and look like an authority figure to both sides.
That phrase that you quoted earlier that he said, that's pretty ingenious, because that puts the self-fulfilling element of their organization. It takes it away from Jim Jones and it puts it on the people.
Yeah. And around this time is when he not only was getting more traction politically in San Francisco and California, but this is around the time when he started looking again at Guyana, because he sent people there around this time. So this is around 1974, I believe. Around 1974 is when he started sending people to Guyana to build People's Temple and the compound that is famously known today. He sent them out there, and they started building it. and there's a lot of issues with it that I don't think I'll have time to get into. But, I mean, the terrain there is horrible for farming. It's nothing but just mud, and it's mud on top of like stone dirt, like hard dirt, and that's like the second
river
layer.
bedrock. Is it like the beginning of the Amazon basin?
I believe so.
So it's very swampy and stuff before it opens up into like the river.
Yeah, but it's north, so it's still like, yeah, it's still pretty.
It's kind of like, it's like Florida.
Yeah,
kind of
close to that type of area, but way more trees, I'd say, because
Gotcha.
it was a straight up jungle
Yeah.
where they had it. So he sent his best workers out there to build this. Now, why did Guyana allow this, you may ask?
I wasn't, but it's okay.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? I will tell you anyways. They allowed Americans to build a compound where they did strategically because Venezuela was not friends with Guyana. Venezuela was actually thinking about invading Guyana at the time because Guyana, if I understand correctly, was a fairly poor country, and a lot of the people identified as Venezuelans who were in Guyana. So they wanted to kind of annex Guyana.
Is Venezuela at this time, this kind of like socialist kind of, I don't want to say beacon, but the socialist marker then that we identify it as today?
I think the beginnings of it are around that time. I will see the timeline of that real quick.
I'll look it up if you want to keep talking.
Guyana, the government allowed for Jim Jones to build this compound strategically close to the Venezuelan border, so that way Venezuela would be like, fuck, they have Americans there, like we're not gonna attack Guyana and accidentally kill Americans, because at that point we're gonna get invaded by America, and they've already fucked up like Nicaragua and Honduras with all these coups. Like, we don't need any more. Little did they know, it was gonna happen to them regardless. But so that was like the big reason why Guyana was like, yes, build it. We need protection. You guys, your lives itself will protect us. So off they went to build this temple. Jim Jones at this time was still in SF, or in Northern California, Ukiah area. They actually franchised 3 other temples, or actually 2 other temples. They had the Ukiah place, and then they had one in San Francisco, and then they had one in LA. So they went across the whole state with this. So he became a really big just figure in California during the late 60s and especially the early 70s. He began to establish himself. So big, in fact, and his following became so recognized that the governor, Jerry Jones, is that his name? Yeah, Jerry
Brown.
Jerry Jones, the Cowboys.
Jerry Jones. They intercept the 2.
Whatever. Yeah. Jerry Brown actually praised him publicly in one of his speeches, I believe. I couldn't find the specific speech, but I'm pretty sure he sung his praises in a public speech.
Quick sidebar. Venezuela, technically the socialist government of Venezuela started in 1999 when Hugo Chavez became president. Technically that's when it started, but as is the case with many countries in South America, there was turmoil, revolution, foreign influence. So
okay, thank you for that. He became a favorite of George Mosconi's. He became a pretty integral part of his entourage, and George Moscone, for those of you who don't know, was the ex-mayor of San Francisco during this time, and he was a Democrat, and he was in a tight race against a Republican candidate. I do not have the name off the top of my head. I did not write it down. I should have. I'm sorry. But he was in a tight race with this Republican, and he needed Jim Jones's support. So Jim Jones sent his entire congregation in the San Francisco chapter and in the Ukiah chapter out on a bus ride to vote for this guy. So they all voted for this man, George Moscone. And of course, this, sparked a lot of media attention to Jim Jones. People started looking into Jim Jones, and they actually started finding a lot of people, defectors from the People's Temple, who, didn't like anything that was going on in the People's Temple. They cited not just the beatings that would happen, but also the boxing matches. So what he would do, Jim Jones and his entourage, would do is with defectors or people who were thinking of leaving, he would force them to fight people like twice their size that they would specifically lose against, and would do this. Sometimes people would have to fight like 5 people in a night, and it would be like an old lady getting beaten up by like 5 dudes, or like a child getting beaten up by like a big, dude with like who is mentally challenged. It was barbaric. It was turning barbaric, and that's what they cited. Jesus. And that's what they used a lot in this article that they published in the San Francisco Chronicle. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, the San Francisco Chronicle. Luckily for Jim Jones, so I kind of skipped over some time because things were just kind of building up still. Like, they was still just building up the church in 1975 and 6. Jim Jones got a copy of that article that was damning him, that exposed the temple for everything. In 1976, he got that before it got published, and he just told everybody overnight. He was like, "We're leaving. We're going." And they're like, "Where?" "We're going to the Promised Land. It's ready." It's like, "Wait, what? It's an actual place? Like, it's ready?" "Yes, it's ready. We're going tomorrow morning. I have the planes ready and everything." So he packed up most of the people and flew out to Guyana. Of course, he only had 2 planes that were given to them by the Guyanese government.
So they wanted Americans there so badly, they donated planes.
They allowed their own government planes flew them out there. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the Guyanese allowed them to come in with their own planes. They flew out, and they had to make multiple trips back and forth, but they got everybody out there. Now imagine if you're a person who built this place. It's like Quinn. It's like when our old boss would be gone for a week in Mexico, right? Everything would work perfectly. Everything's just fine. We're chilling. Like, everyone's just happy going to work. We're chilling. And then he comes back, and he's just, "Herschel, what are you doing? Huh? Why are you doing things this way? Why are you doing things that way? Why didn't you tell this person that?" Like, he started micromanaging everything. People's lives became even more miserable. And also, he was able to decompress out of his Jim Jones pastor sermon character. At the end of the day, he was able to go home and just like not be that guy for at least an hour or two. Over here in Guyana, he had to be on all the time, constantly, and this is where his alcoholism and his drug use of amphetamines became a bigger issue, and you could hear it in some of the recordings. So he started sounding like the droopy dog. He started talking like that.
He's too deep now. There's no way out.
Yeah, there's no way out. And what's crazy, and I think this ties to Waco actually a little bit, why the government reacted like they did with Waco and also to Ruby Ridge prior to Waco. Jesus Christ. The government didn't really care that everyone was going to Guyana. Like, they got a bunch of complaints, but the government was like, "Wait, if they want to go, they can go. Like, it's not our issue. Like, they can do what they want. Like, I'm sorry that you miss your daughter, but sorry, Mom, you there's nothing we can do."
Kick
like,
rocks. Yeah,
she's gone. So sorry.
So families of the people that were in the People's Temple were complaining similar to Scientology. They complained to the government.
They were complaining a lot. Specifically in San Mateo County. A ton of people in San Mateo County.
Home of Tom Brady.
Home of Tom Brady. Yeah,
home of Gabriela Elwell.
And Gabriela Elwell. It's true. Who needs Tom Brady when you got Gabriela Elwell? But people from San Mateo County were complaining so much that actually the congressman of the time, Leo Ryan, made arrangements to go to check out the People's Temple compound in Guyana, in Jonestown.
What exactly were they complaining about? Like, what was the nature of their complaints? Was it oddities? Was it,
they were fearing for their relative lives because of the article that came out.
Oh, okay, I got you. So it wasn't just like adjacent community members who, are just like paranoid about these people living in their community. They're just kind of weird, and so they're just like forcing complaints. These are actually people with blood ties to this thing. Gotcha.
Yeah, family meaning like blood family, like relatives that never wanted them to be in this organization to begin with, that now fear for their relatives' lives. That's who's complaining. And so Leo Ryan, actually, he's a very hands-on type of congressman from what I could gather. He actually spent a week as an inmate in Folsom State Prison just so that way he could, see what could be fixed in that specific prison. So
Damn.
he was a very hands-on type of congressman.
A rarity.
Yeah. And although he was going to go to Guyana, sorry. Although he was going to go there and he was saying, "Oh, I'm going to help your relatives," he really didn't care because they went under their own free will as he thought. And he was like, "I can get a vacation out of this. Like, I'm going to go to South America. We're going to chill with these people in Jonestown. It's going to be chill. I'm going to bring like the news crew. They'll like film some stuff and like it'll be fine. I'll be back in a week." Well, he didn't come back in a week, okay? Little did he know that Jim Jones, when he got there, started instituting this policy of white nights. And he called these nights white nights because this is when they would practice. Like, he would gather everybody and he would say, "All right, the U.S. government is at our doorstep. They're right over there across the tree line. Like, they're right there. This is it. We're dying tonight. Like, drink this." And everybody was forced to drink this concoction of, Flavor Aid. They knew that it was poison, but they were forced to drink it because they swore allegiance to Jim Jones. And then he would watch everybody drink it, and then he'd say, "Okay, it was just a test." And these were called white nights. Not black nights, because most of his congregation was black, and he didn't want any sort of bad stigma on that. So it was white nights. And so when Leo Ryan came, oddly, he was very, very quiet about everything. He didn't say anything regarding there being another white night or anything. He allowed them to come in. And also, I got to say, people think that Leo Ryan was the only person, or like Leo Ryan and his group of politicians and like media were the only people that ever went into Jonestown before this. They were there a whole year before Leo Ryan came. So they were there from 1977 till, November 18th, 1978. So they were there just for a year. I don't know what day they arrived because a lot of people, came in waves, but it was 77 to 78. And actually, the Russian government came earlier in the year to see the compound because they were all trying to get annexation from or protection from the Russian government, and they literally just came to like laugh at Jonestown. They like came and they're like, "Oh, you guys are more socialist than us." Huh? And they just left. Like, they were like, "Okay, we don't care." That literally happened. And so with that out of the way, this isn't out of the ordinary for people to come and visit Jonestown. So they hosted Leo Ryan and his entourage the night of, November 17th, 1978. He flew in and they threw a big party for him. And they were singing. They actually had a band that was playing there. Very good band. They actually recorded an album. They recorded an album in the Museum of Death before it was the Museum of Death. Which, fun fact. But anyways, they were playing music and it was like a party. And Leo Ryan famously gets on the mic at the end of this party. And it's like, "I have not seen anything today that has led me to believe that you all are in danger. I am thoroughly impressed." And the roar of the crowd, even just listening to this, like over just the internet, through YouTube, just hearing that was ridiculous. Like, it was almost one of the loudest things I've ever heard. And I was listening to it on like low volume. So if I know that if I would have turned it up, my ears would have been ringing a lot. So these people were just like super loud. And what's interesting is looking back after everything that happened is that you could hear the relief in that scream, that yell. Like, people were like, "Okay, we're not dying tonight. Like, we're safe." Because he believes that everything's fine here. That
Wow.
you hear that kind of primal like happiness come out. It's scary.
It was a scream of relief.
Yes.
Wow.
And shortly after that, one of the members, I forgot their name, but they were actually interviewed in the PBS documentary, which I pulled a lot of this information from, of Jonestown. But he walked up to the congressman, or actually, no, to a news crew member who he thought was a congressman. And he like shakenly handed this guy a note. And he was so scared that he dropped the note and picked it back up. And a little kid next to him was like, "He passed the note. He passed a note. So like the little kid, even like little kids were indoctrinated in this thing. Like they were told like to make it, be alarm systems basically for the entire group. And so at that point, shit hit the fan. And like other people came forward and were like, hey, can you please help us get out of here? Like, we don't want to be here. I know you think that it looks nice, but this is all just a show. Like, we want to go. And so like Leo Ryan's like, God damn it, man. I was trying to just chill. Like, I'm not being here. I don't want to be here to save people.
It's my vacation, yo.
Exactly.
Bummer, right?
He's like, you're such a buzzkill, man. Like, all you guys wanting to go home. Like, Jesus.
Oh.
So he's like begrudgingly like, okay, all right, we'll see if we have enough room to take you guys out, with us. Like, we don't have that much room on the planes. We have 2 planes just like you did coming in. So like, we don't have a lot of room. And so they go to sleep that day, and Jim Jones knows about this. But he's like, okay, my people are conditioned enough to like snuff out any defectors. They're not going to allow anybody to leave. Like, I trust my people enough for that. But then in the night, like 17 people ran out and left the compound into the jungle, never to be seen again. I think some of them got back to the States, but I'm not sure. I didn't follow their story, their journey much, but I just know they escaped the compound. And then the morning, it was fucking chaos. Everybody, like, there was people packing their things. Other people were like trying to stop those people who were packing. There was like children crying. Like, Jim Jones wakes up at noon and he's like, what the fuck is going on?
Who wakes up at noon?
I do some. Apparently Quinn does too.
Never mind.
But yeah, so he wakes up at noon and he walks outside and everything's just going crazy. And he's like, okay, this is bad. Like, this is it. He knew today's the day. And he goes up to Leo Ryan, who's getting his things together and is having breakfast in like the common plaza area. And he goes up and he starts talking to him, saying like, I don't know why these people are acting crazy. It's just, some of us are kind of hungry. We're running low on food, and, trying to make excuses. And Leo's just like, hey man, I get it. Like, it's fine. No worries. Like, if people want to leave, like, people can leave though. Right. And he's like, yeah, of course people can leave. Yeah. Like, it's fine. And he's like, okay, well, can you say that to like the news crew? They wanted to interview you. He's like, yeah, I can, yeah, I'll do that. I'll say that to the news crew. So he has an interview with the news crew on November 18th, 1978. He has an interview that you can watch on YouTube where he's just like shaking and he's just like, yeah. They're like, so people can leave if they want to. He's like, yeah, I've never said they couldn't leave. Why would I allow that? Like, we're happy though. No one wants to leave. And then they hand him a note, the note that the guy gave the news crew the night before. It's like, well, we have a note saying that like the conditions are terrible here and people want to leave. He's like, oh, why are you gonna listen to these liars? They're liars. Like, I can't stop people from lying. Of course there's going to be people who are going to lie, but we're doing fine. Like, I don't control everybody. I can't control the people, like, trying to save face. And eventually Leo Ryan is like gathering his things and is about to leave. And Jim Jones, got all these J names, dude. Blockhead, okay? Blockhead goes up to one of his closest, like, enforcers. And it's like, hey, I need you to kill Leo Ryan. Here's a knife. He gives him a knife. And he sends him out. And this guy's, like, shaking. And it's just chaos everywhere. Because it's, like, over 900 people just, like, trying to do a bunch of shit. I don't know. Some people leaving, some people going. He goes up to Leo Ryan and it's just like, it's time for you to die, motherfucker. And he just stands there with his knife on his throat. And Leo Ryan's just like frozen.
Is this quoted? You will die today, motherfucker?
Yeah, that's quoted.
Okay.
That's quoted. He says that. And he freezes. And then 2 other members of the cult grab the assailant and throw him down and like restrain him. So like, people are even like trying to protect the congressman at this point. So, and in the process of getting thrown down, the assailant cut his hand and blood splattered on Leo Ryan. That's why you see blood on him. A lot of people think he got cut by that guy, but he didn't. It was the assailant's blood on Leo Ryan. So after that, they're like, fuck this. Let's get out of here. So everyone is leaving, and there's like even more pandemonium because like kids are like crying because their mom, like some people's moms left them there because they just wanted to go, they just needed to go home. So like some people left their kids and their family at Jonestown who wanted to stay. They even left them. So it was a really, really emotional packed day. And as they were leaving, so they filled up like a dump truck. That's what they called it, but it just looked like a pickup truck full of people. And they were driving to the airport or to the airstrip. And all of a sudden this other car drives up full of like armed guards, but not in like armor. Actually, I shouldn't say armed guards. I don't know. They had guns and they started unloading on Leo Ryan and his entourage and like the other people who were trying to leave, the defectors. And off in the distance were Guyanese military who were watching this happen. And they were like, oh, it's those crazy people out in Jonestown. Should we step in? No, we're not going to step in because if we kill Americans at any rate, we're going to get fucked up. So we can't do anything. So Leo Ryan and 4 others passed away in that drive-by shooting.
There was other congressmen there, or congressmen and women there too, that were.
Yeah, you're right. There was a second congresswoman who.
It's Jackie Spears, right?
Yes.
No. Yeah, it was Jackie Spears.
Yeah. She got injured, I believe. Mm-hmm. And she actually talked in that documentary, and she's like, "Yeah, I got shot." And they actually went around and they shot everybody like point blank range who was laying on the ground. So everybody got injured, but miraculously some people survived it and talked about it in that documentary, which I highly recommend you to check out. It's called Jonestown by PBS. And so at that point, while that onslaught is happening on the airstrip, you pivot over to Jonestown, and Jim Jones has everybody in the center area of Jonestown, and he's like, "It's time. It's the final white night." And everybody was just like, "What? Like it's not real. Like you've cried wolf so many times." And like he's like, "No, it's really happening. It's really happening. Get everything together." So he sent his circle to get the cyanide, which the most fucked up part for me is the cost of the cyanide. It cost him $8. $8 plus the flavor aid. I don't know how much that costed, but I know the cyanide itself cost $8 for him to kill over 900 people.
Did they have to like import the cyanide, or because cyanide, you can naturally harvest it from certain plants?
Yeah, no, they bought it in the States, and
gotcha.
then they brought it with them. He had the cyanide for years prior.
Okay, I was wondering if like the reason why it was so cheap was maybe it was purchased outside of America, but
I see. Yeah, no.
You also have to take into account how much there was and also inflation. So $8 then is not $8 today.
I agree.
But also, you have to have a lot of cyanide to kill over 900 people.
Yeah. It sounds, well, okay, it actually doesn't sound worse than it is. It still is bad regardless, but yeah, you have to take into account things. But at the end of the day, 900 people died, and it's really
At the end of the day, we don't need math, and we don't need to sit here and determine the cost of...
the proportion. How much cyanide for one person,
goes back to the grocery store, Marco.
I know it does. I know, it's fine. So they first started with the children, and they had syringes full of this stuff, the flavor aid mixed with cyanide, and they didn't inject the kids. They didn't stab them. They just, shot it in their mouths, and they drank it. And you could hear, there's archives of this where you hear Jim Jones talking while these people are dying. I don't think there's video, just audio, but you hear like children crying and stuff, and he's just like, "It'll be okay. We're going to a better place. We're just passing over to another area. We're not, another plane. We're not actually dying. This is the death of our physical form, and we're not actually dying." A lot of people claim, even like the survivors claim, that he even didn't believe in God even up till the end. Like he didn't care. He was just saying this stuff just to save face. And he started with the children, and then eventually, once they were all gone, the adults went up and took cups and started drinking. And the people who didn't want to take it were attacked, and those were stabbed. Those people were injected with needles that had the cyanide infused flavor aid injected into their arms. some people were able to escape, and there are survivors from Jonestown who do talk about it. And there's one actually who's the head of the Jonestown Institute, who I got some information from. And Jim Jones himself, though, was shot in the head by one of his closest confidants, I guess. This younger girl, I forgot her name, but she was the last one to die. She shot herself. She was tasked for cleaning up and like basically making sure everybody else was dead before she took her own life. 900, including the people who died on the airstrip, 914 people died because of this man and his teachings and everything that he did. Thus concludes the horrific tragedy of Jonestown. And I will say that after this happened, the awareness of cults and for cults across the United States just like spread like wildfire, and it ramped up to what I would say is Waco. And that's where I will leave this portion, because we are going to talk about Waco next on our next episode. So I hope you guys are interested in that. But that is kind of the ascent and downfall of Jonestown and Blockhead.
Sir Blockhead himself.
Sir Blockhead.
So after hearing you talk about it from start to finish, it's actually really interesting, because I started thinking, because we don't all say, but the term drink the Kool-Aid, it's meant more as you are following everyone else. So that's how you're drinking the Kool-Aid, is you're with a group of people and you're following them.
Yes.
In a more civilized situation. But hearing you talk about this, people were trying to escape. People did not want to drink the Kool-Aid.
Not everybody.
So it's interesting how it's formulated into how we use the phrase today.
Yeah, exactly. And what's really interesting is that phrase is like the lasting memory of Jonestown. And it
wasn't even Kool-Aid.
It wasn't even Kool-Aid. And also, he always wanted to be revered as like this great godly man. He wanted to have that place in the culture's heart of, oh, Jim Jones. Whenever you bring up his name, just, oh, he was such a great guy. Oh, he was such a great, he wanted that. And what did he been? And what did he get? It seems like those liberals over there are drinking the Kool-Aid. Like that's what he gets. That's his legacy. Just a joke, like a phrase that people use very, very just nonchalantly.
I don't think his legacy is a joke, though. It's more. It's not over 900 people died.
Oh,
so
no,
that's what he's known for. Not.
I agree, but I think the thing that culturally we tend to associate with him is that phrase.
You're saying the joke has diminished the actual consequences of something
to a degree, because I just think it's interesting and kind of funny, not in a funny way, not funny in the sense like 914 people died and that's funny, but it's funny how his end goal was so narcissistic. He was such a narcissistic person, and he always wanted to look good in front of people. He wanted everyone to love him, and he ended up, everybody that did love him, he killed them, and then the rest of the world thinks of him as not just a psychopath and not just a manipulator, but also giving fodder to that kind of tongue-in-cheek like sort of mentality. And that's what I'm kind of referring to.
Yeah. And there's so much information out there on Jonestown, which is great, because like you mentioned, it did spark how to point out a cult. And luckily there was like videos at that time too. So I know that it's really hard to stomach watching these documentaries and hearing these stories. Even just you talking about it, my stomach's upside down.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I hate it. It makes me so upset. Like, it made me so mad yesterday, like just hearing like the kids and all this stuff. Like there's people who consciously made the choice to, yes, like I'm going to drink this, but even they are victims because like they believed that this man is saving them. This man is their salvation, and therefore, and through manipulation, through these brute tactics, he was able to convince all those people, and by force or by mental manipulation, to kill themselves. And it's just so fucked up. It's ridiculous that it was even possible, and it just shows like the state of America at that time, because there were so many things that were happening that, a cult in, Northern California was the last thing on the public's mind. There was like, okay, we have a lot of other things to worry about. Martin Luther King got, shot. Like, that was in the 60s, but still, like, there was so many other public or,
well, you got
social things happening.
The Iran hostage situation, right? Jimmy Carter's president in '78, huh?
Yeah. Yep.
So there are some big things going on around this time.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing how, because like you guys just mentioned that there are like bigger things happening at that time frame, and just how people take advantage of these vulnerable situations. And I think we're still seeing that today.
I think so too.
Especially with the civil unrest that's occurring. You just see these awful people taking advantage, and they get overlooked because there's something bigger going on.
Exactly. And it's sickening that even happened. But at the same time, the only thing we can do is be more vigilant and fair when it comes to, these sorts of things. Because, like, it goes back to also the conversation that I had with Brianna last week, where we talked about grooming. Like, grooming happens all the time. It's not just, it's not just a inherently harmful thing. Like, you get groomed by your parents to fit into society. You get groomed by your teachers in order to fit into the classroom setting. It's
almost so commonplace that it doesn't even merit its own terminology.
Maybe, possibly. I would argue it does, but that's for another time. But anyways, like, it's so hard to see when people get indoctrinated or, like, set in their ways, ideologically speaking. It's really tough to see that, and it's just awareness, really, is the theme that I get, or the lesson is just, you got to be more aware, you got to be more careful, overall. Sorry to bum everybody out. Jesus Christ, everyone's just like, oh fuck, this is so sad. Nothing ends well with cults. That's the thing too, But but anyways,
let me ask you this:
yes.
Do you feel like the term cult has been reduced to a sort of demonization sort of term? Do you think in its true definition that it actually applies to damn near everything else?
What do you think, Abby?
Oh yeah. Well, no, I was just thinking about that too, because like, what determines a cult versus not a cult? Because you can claim anything as a cult, and
right. I mean, like a political party.
Yeah, that can easily
almost blind faith is in itself. That's like the prerequisite.
That's the key ingredient.
Yeah, so I think what determines a cult outside of a community is, like we were talking about, this just a narcissistic figure that is manipulating individuals and believing that they cannot function without that community.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's almost every organization, is it not?
Well,
I think that gets into a very broad and big conversation. That's the cuts right there. You get.
I know, that's what you're asking. But take like yoga, a good example of, people can call it a cult because you have Bikram, but there's so much more to it, and there's not one specific person or one specific group that people are looking up to, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that doesn't make sense.
I guess my question is every religion in itself a cult? At the very basic definition of what a cult is, does every religion fall underneath that umbrella?
Every religion, at least at some point, or I can't make a definitive claim, but in my mind, I would assume, safely, I think, it's safe to assume that at some point every religion has at least started or has had some sort of leanings towards cultistic practices at some point in their existence. But I can't definitively like point to every single instance. But
right. Yeah. Well, I mean, the cult itself is a very hard term to define. Cults have existed since paganism. The cult of Dionysus.
Yeah.
If the two key ingredients of a cult is one, a strong figurehead,
Mhm.
and two, blind faith of its supporters. I think one
Yeah.
could make the argument that cults are essential to civilization. That civilization is in itself a
Uh-huh.
cult.
I think, well, that's the thing though, is you could argue possibly for the possibility of civilization being comprised of cults,
Right. A
but
collection of cults.
I wouldn't say civilization in itself is a cult. I think in the thing too you have to remember is with cults, you are away from society. You are 100% stripped of your identity, and you are just part of this greater collective. And in a country,
Could you call the greater or smaller collective itself a society?
What do you?
Are
What?
you not abandoning one society for another?
It's like its own ecosystem,
Mm-hmm.
I think is what
Yeah,
we're
and
getting
it's
at here.
it's an ecosystem that I think specifically benefits inherently and in every single way benefits that one person at the top, and they will disguise all of these terrible things as I'm helping you, I'm doing you a favor, I'm doing all these things. I don't think that practice that's very defining of a cult in my opinion, and you see that especially in Jonestown. Like that's like Jim Jones's
Right.
like
Right. To
calling
be clear,
card.
I'm not taking a side. I'm just posing questions.
Yeah,
No,
they're pressing questions, and I think they're great. So I actually searched the definition of a cult, and the first thing that comes up off of Google is a religion or religious sect generally considered to be extremist or false. And then you go on to the Merriam-Webster, and it's a religion regarded as unorthodox. So
well,
both of those kind of have
that's very complicated, because who determines what's unorthodox if not the majority?
Exactly.
And because like I don't know, for me, like I look at certain religious groups that most don't consider to be a cult, and I would be like, they kind of look like a cult, but then others are like, no, why would that be? No, like they're not a cult, they don't. So I think it's very subjective, but there are objective instances of where it's like, yes, this is a cult. And that's what I was kind of getting at in the intro for Jonestown when I was ramping up to talk about it, is that like we throw that term around so much, and we try to lump people into these groups, and like you said, Quinn, demonize each other, when that word cult has so much weight behind it, and there's so many things that are attached to that term.
When did it take on a negative connotation?
I think
because it wasn't always negatively associated.
I don't know. I haven't studied cults in general. I just have studied Jonestown. So right. I would think around this time, because this is such a, this is like one of the first moments where like there was this cult that did this crazy thing. And you have to also think Manson and the Manson family was, I believe, earlier than this.
A decade earlier.
Yeah. So
late 60s.
Yeah. So like the Manson family already happened. And so people already had this idea of, cult activity. But the thing too is I think when it comes to the Manson murders and the Manson family, people are like, oh, those are just hippies. And like that look, that aesthetic that they portrayed, that's what we have to look out for more so than the practices. And no one thought Jim Jones, this guy with like aviator sunglasses and slick back hair and like a really nice suit and a lot of money, would be leading something very similar to the Manson family. Like, I don't think people saw that.
I guess I come away just questioning, much in a way that every revolutionary is considered a terrorist by the country they're trying to break away from.
Mm-hmm. To a degree.
So I wonder, how the majority dictates the perception of these sort of things.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know how to answer that. I think it's just
my train of thought's everywhere, but I'm thinking like, the colonials were once considered terrorists by England.
Well, I think there's difference between terrorists and cults.
Orthodox Christianity is considered unorthodox because of Western Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'm just, I'm snowballing to what effect the majority has on labeling minorities.
Yeah.
Which we know is obvious, but
I think just cults, and the cults that we're talking about specifically, are like very, very small, very like subgroups of the greater society. Whereas what you're talking about, these ideas, these religions have been elevated to a point in our society where they comprise millions of people, and at that point they're integral to our culture and integral to our country. At that point, those groups, there's not one specific figure being like, hey, you got to get your spankings tonight. Like, there's not, like, none of that's happening, like at least
don't read the Old Testament.
Yeah. Okay. I know there's exceptions to that, but the greater amount of people, most people would look down on those types of practices.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just curious, to what point does the minority evolve into something that is accepted? So I'm curious, if Jonestown had never ventured, into the dark arts, they, if they had kept growing in population, would they have just been accepted as a separate branch of Christianity?
Well, Scientology is a great example of this then, if that's what you're going for. Even though Scientology is actually one of the only religions that are recognized as a religion that is not a form of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a lot of people, these leaders, they want more star power, and that's how they get it spread across through a bunch of different people, because they're able to get into the media and promote it that way. Exactly. While we see Jim Jones took it from a different approach.
Mm-hmm. He was definitely leaning that way. He wanted to run. He was going, like, he had aspirations to one day, like, run for governor of California and like become a political, like, person, a huge figure across the country and become a global name. Like, he wanted that. But his narcissism and his fear of people leaving him got in the way of that.
Do you think every religious leader has to have some sort of degree of narcissism?
Yeah. To a degree. I think every person on earth has a degree of narcissism.
Right, but leaders themselves have to. Do you think a prerequisite for leadership is to have a higher degree of narcissism, perhaps, than your average Joe or Jill?
What do you think, Gabby? Do you have a response to that?
I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of people that
like who seeks to be president, if not to be president?
Well, okay, so I think politics is different because you can take, politics, you have those, we've seen it, very just narcissistic figures. And then you have...
Same thing with the Pope. I would say same thing with the Pope, maybe. I don't know.
Makes sense. But you do have people trying to come in and change that and want to bring a greater good for the community. And I think Martin Luther King is probably a great example of that. He didn't want this to be a public figure, but he just had so much goodness to say that he somehow just kind of got put into that leadership role.
There are instances of people not necessarily wanting to become leaders who wind up becoming leaders of causes because they are chosen by the people, not necessarily appointed by themselves. Although that's becoming more and more rare, that does happen. I mean, recently, we've seen nobody but people like what you're talking about, in the government. And I think that's where a lot of modern problems stem from, at least the problems we're facing right now, I think. We can agree on. I think all three of us can agree on that for sure.
I just wondered, to what level in any sort of position of power is there an intrinsic selfishness to acquire that, from the lowest level to the top level? From your police officer, is there a selfishness? I want to help people because it makes me feel better.
Well, there's plenty of studies and books out there that proves that this is true, that's why we do community service. Like, even though it is something greater than us and it's much appreciated, but there's always going to be selfishness involved in it because it makes us feel good.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why I do the podcast. That's why I did it, because I needed something to do to keep me occupied and to make me feel like I'm being productive and feel good. And like, as much as people listen to it, and I love the people that listen to it, thank you. Also, thank you to the one person who keeps listening to us all the way from Manhattan, New York. You're awesome.
Yes.
You're awesome.
Shout out to Manhattan.
Yeah, shout out. I've never been there, but I really want to now.
Oh, you should bring this person on.
Dude, I would love to. DM the Closers Podcast Instagram account at the Closers Podcast, and I will get back to you. But like, even
please
though
please be like a child. That would be fucking hilarious. I would die.
Like just like a 12-year-old, like, oh, this sounds good.
I'd be like, okay, I need to. Yeah, if I have them on, I'd have to have them like sign a waiver, have their parents sign like, hey, you need to allow your kid to like come on the show if you're comfortable with that.
No, I think it'd be best just to avoid that altogether.
I agree with you, Quinn.
I agree. I'm just saying, like, if it came to that.
If you're over the age of 18 and you've been listening to this podcast, please DM Marco.
Yes, please. And if you're from Manhattan, yeah, that'd be awesome. But yeah, I mean, I think that's an example of like where selfish, there's always selfish feelings in everything. And I mean, but selfishness inherently isn't negative. That's another thing that people have to remember. Like, just because you do selfish things, it doesn't mean that you are a bad person. It doesn't mean,
right.
Too much of one thing is a bad thing. That's what I talk about a lot on Closing Out the Week. That's what my theme of the week is always. It's always a yin and yang. It's like, well, yeah, balance. It's all balance. It always comes down to balance, it seems. Well, do you guys have anything else to say before we pivot and go to weekly recommendations?
No, Marco, just thank you for enlightening us, enlightening me on Jonestown. I appreciate it.
Of course. It's my pleasure, sir.
Thanks, Marco. This has been great. I'm stoked to work with you too for the next couple times.
It'll be fun. Thank you, Gabby, for coming on. Can't wait to hear more from you as well. What's the cult that you are going to be investigating? I don't think we talked about it.
I think Quinn pronounces it the best.
Quinn, how do you pronounce the cult that she's...
I have no idea what to say. On the surface, it looks like numbers to me. It looks like Roman numerals.
On that note, no. We'll be doing a bit of digging on Nixium.
Nixium. Awesome. Can't wait for that. It's going to be a fun ride. It's actually the most recent of the 3 cults that we are going to be deep diving on. So that'll be cool. That'll be the last episode of the series. Quinn will come at us next time with Waco, Texas. Waco, Texas. Them Texas thumbs.
I could use a Texas thumb.
Right now we're going to go and do some weekly recs. So here they are. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed that pretty long part, that long segment with Gabriela Elwell. She'll be on, like we said, for 2 more episodes in the future. We're going to talk about Waco, and also Nixium, or whatever it's called.
Awesome. Wow.
Yep. We're going to talk about that cult, the most recent one, with Gabby. She's going to break down that one. Quinn's going to break down Waco. But right now, we have some recommendations for you. We're going to keep it very short, 1 recommendation each for this week, since this is a pretty long episode. Don't want to keep you for too long. So, Quinn, what is your recommendation for this week?
As you hinted at seconds ago, on our next episode featuring Gabby, I will be discussing Waco. The Waco tragedy. There's no other way you could identify it as anything but a tragedy. I firmly believe there's America pre-Waco and there's an America post-Waco. My recommendation is a 6-part series that came out on the Paramount Network 2 years ago that you can currently find on Netflix that draws upon 2 books, Stalling Time by Gary Noser, who was the lead FBI negotiator in the Waco case for the first half of it, and a autobiography by one of the survivors, one of the 9 survivors of the Waco tragedy, David Thibodeau, whose name of the book I can't remember. I think it's called Surviving Waco. The series itself stars the incomparable Michael Shannon, who I believe is one of the great actors of our time. As Gary Noser, Taylor Kitsch from Friday Night Lights, the series, plays David Koresh, the leader of the Branch Davidians. It's John Leguizamo. John Leguizamo is also in this, and he steals the fucking show. John Leguizamo is legit. But basically what it does, this 6-part series, is it chronicles the Waco siege. And what's brilliant about it is that it's unbiased. It does, I will say that it does temper some of the things around David Koresh, but I appreciate how it took from two primary sources on opposing sides, and consolidated that to form one coherent story.
Interesting.
That's something that you don't often get. That's something that was completely void of when Waco happened.
Yeah.
All that was propagated was the federal narrative. Excuse me. And what this series really does is illuminate and, most importantly, humanize the poor souls that died at Waco. Man, we have a tendency. And in this, you'll hear this a lot in these episodes that we're talking about when it comes to like cults and stuff. We have a tendency to ostracize, demonize, and dehumanize people who sort of fall into these sort of things. And I think this show does a really fantastic job of restoring humanity to these people. And that's a noble thing. It's a noble thing. It gives agency to people who were, in my opinion, murdered. And I highly recommend it. It's self-titled Waco on Netflix for you guys to enjoy right now.
Thanks, Quinn. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to check that out before your episode comes out. It is not going to be the Waco episode. Our Waco episode is not going to be out until Wednesday the 26th. In between that, we are going to interview Paper Airplanes, a local Sacramento pop punk band. They're pretty close friends of mine in the music scene, so I'm really excited to talk to them. But after that episode, then we're going to get to Waco. So you have time to consume that 6-part series. You have about 2 weeks. So for my recommendation, it is very much in the lane of cults and has to do with cult activity, and it is a documentary called Holy Hell. It is on Netflix. It is directed by
Will Allen. Will Allen was the writer and director.
Will Allen, who is the writer and director of the movie. He also was a member of the cult that they explore and kind of expose in this documentary. It centers around the cult called the Buddha Field, and this one man, his name, he changes his name constantly, but he's called Michael at one point, and
Michelle.
Michelle at one point, and then this other guy. What are some other names, Quinn?
He goes by Andreas at the end.
Andreas and Reishi at the very end. At the very end, he calls himself Reishi. He changes his name constantly, and it's a cult that was established in like the 80s, and it still exists today. They moved from from Hollywood to Austin, Texas, and then they went out to Hawaii. And a
stone's throw away from where I am right now. Honestly, God, not far. Same island. Yeah.
And so it just talks about how that cult became established, how it started out not as a cult, and then it very much started a pattern that we've seen pretty often, and you can draw some parallels between Jonestown, the People's Temple, and the Buddha Field. Obviously, the Buddha field didn't get to the point as Jonestown did, but just the moving around, the movement from, point A, first you have Hollywood, then Austin, now Hawaii, with Jonestown. You have Indianapolis, Ukiah, Guyana. So you have a lot of movement, and that's one really interesting takeaway I took away from it. But there are some, comedic moments. There are some light moments within this documentary that you're just looking at the TV. You're asking yourself, what the fuck what am I looking at? And you have some, very sad moments, some very, very touching, emotional parts as well. There's a little bit of everything in it, and you come away with some sympathy, but also a lesson in the resiliency of the human spirit. And I think that's the biggest lesson you could take away from this documentary, Holy Hell, which is on Netflix, and it is directed, like I said, by Will Allen. So that is my recommendation. Quinn, what did you think of the documentary?
I thought it was amazing. It had one thing it had in its favor. It used so much of the amateur footage that Will Allen captured.
Yeah.
Man, that took you right into Buddha Field. And it was some real spectacular footage too. Man, it was really awesome. It was really cool. There are parts that are so fantastic, and I don't mean that in a positive sense, but in like a otherworldly sense. Like, you wouldn't expect half of this shit that happens. That it's hard almost not to laugh.
Yeah,
you're just like, oh my god.
Yeah.
And then, it draws you back in, and you're just like, oh, Jesus, and you feel like an asshole for laughing. But
exactly. And I don't know about you, but I found myself like getting entrenched within the Buddha field myself while watching like the first part of it. And then all of a sudden, like, I snap out of it at a certain part. I don't want to give anything away, but you snap out of it at a certain point. You're like, wait, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
And
the high ends.
Yeah. Then you're just like, I can't believe this is happening. Wait a second. Like, this isn't normal. Like, none of this shit is normal. And then it does a great job of immersing you, just like you said. Immerses the viewer, and then it snaps you out of it at a certain point, and you're just like, I can't believe that I even kind of fell into it, just even for this like short 30 minutes.
Much like a trance.
Yes.
Much like a trance. And then, you snap back to reality, and you realize how harsh that reality is.
Exactly.
And, what a great name, Buddha Field. What a dope fucking name. The only name that could be better is Gouda Field.
Gouda? Bacon and Gouda. A great Starbucks sandwich.
I'll tell you what, I'd join that cult tomorrow. The Gouda Field. Is that a cheesy joke? Hey-o!
Oh my, okay.
Hey.
I think,
hey,
all right, okay.
hey.
I think this episode's run its course. I think it's time for us to bid you all an adieu. Please follow us on Instagram at The Closers Podcast, on Facebook at Closers Podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are The Closers Podcast. Share these episodes with your friends, your family, and your significant others.
Make sure if you guys go to YouTube, you have the option to switch the notification setting to where you can see all of our content, including Closing Out the Week, hosted by Marco, Hang 10, hosted by me, and of course, our flagship, The Closers Podcast.
Yep.
Every Wednesday.
Exactly. You can get all three of those shows by just subscribing to our YouTube channel or our Spotify or our iTunes. You can have your choice. We also are on every other podcasting service, streaming service. So you have your choice. You have your pick of the litter, whatever you want. And like I said, please share these episodes. Helps out a lot. And we will be back next week with Paper Airplanes. Very excited for that interview. And I will be closing out your week in style on Friday. Thank you guys. Take care.